What I wanted to do this session is something, a new exploration for me, actually not totally new, something I've been exploring for some time now. And this will be just the first time I've really spoken about it in public or to anybody really. So this is sort of, I've been putting together my thinking around Buddha's Four Noble Truths, what he meant by that. And just, I've been looking at sort of a different understanding, which I think I was a more sort of more in line with, I think, where, non-duality is taking us today in our thinking. And the traditional idea of Buddha's teaching, this is the very, not traditional, this is the very conventional, superficial idea. I read saying this, or was on a site somewhere recently, Buddha said, life is suffering, we have to put up with it, and it's all our own creation. And that's a very superficial, somewhat sort of new agey view that we create reality. If you're sick, it's your fault. If you've lost your job, it's your fault. If you're injured, it's your fault. It's like, I don't go along with that at all. But that's the very sort of, that's the most superficial thing. But it's a common idea that's out there by people who haven't really looked at Buddhism at all. Buddha, just to briefly recap his story and how he came to his Four Noble Truths, because I think it's, probably quite a few of you know it, but for those who don't, he was born a rich prince, had everything he needed, great food, service, opportunity. He had a wonderful, wonderful life, but he just realized he was still not happy, and as he put it, still suffering, still not happy. And so he left home. He left everything, went out on the road, became the first wandering hippie. Well, not the first maybe, but left everything, just went out on the road, left his home, family, in search for, the way to end suffering. And he spent 6 years traveling around, studied with probably some of the best teachers around, which at that stage were few and far between. Remember, India at that stage was really, the spiritual teachings were all about ritual, obeying the gods, that sort of stuff. The idea of the self and the Upanishads was only just beginning to creep in, and they were called the forest teachings. So he was out there looking for the forest teachings and studied with these people. It ended up with the idea that you've got to give up everything. He'd already given up home and everything, but it got to the stage where he was giving up eating. There's hardly eating anything at all. I mean, it is said, who knows, he had 1 grain of rice a day. I can't believe that. But anyway, he gave up everything, emaciated, nearly dying. And then came this realization, and that, basically a healthy mind and a healthy body. And so he started eating again and sat in meditation under this tree and had his awakening, which was really, it's not about giving up things in the world, renunciation of things, but it's, as he put it, giving up clinging to ideas and beliefs, really about what will make us happy. But it was about giving up clinging was his realization. It's a mental thing. We need to give up a mental thing. And he was excited by this. And I think, most people who wake up are excited by their discovery. This is what it's about. And he rushed off to find 6 of his fellow travelers who'd been traveling around together, visiting the various teachers, and they were sitting in a park. And the story goes, at first they were sort of really annoyed with him because he'd clearly been eating and not doing what they were meant to be doing. But then he told them, and this is what the Four Noble Truths are said to be, is the truths he told them upon meeting him, upon his awakening. And noble is an interesting word here, because we think of noble, in our culture, either it's the old idea of a nobleman, an aristocratic person, but also, we think of noble as somebody who, does something good, or you would say, oh, that was very noble of you. That was very, very noble of you. We use it in that sense as well. What the word actually means, the Pali word, Pali was the language he spoke, which is actually very close to Sanskrit. But the word noble there meant somebody who'd awakened, somebody who was awake or had tasted awakening. But basically it meant a wise person. A noble person was a wise person. And he was somebody who, awakened. And so the Four Noble Truths were basically the truths as seen by a wise person. And I think that's an important context for all this. And the first noble truth was the truth of suffering. And the word that was used there was dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A. We don't worry about spellings. Dukkha, which actually is a negation. It's a negative of the word sukha. And sukha means to be at ease, to be content. So dukkha means not feeling at ease, not feeling content. So that's what he was meaning by suffering, not sort of abject pain, what we think of as real suffering. He just meant discontent, not feeling happy, not feeling at ease. And he was saying we all feel that. And I think that's something we can all relate to. I think most of us probably spend a lot of our time feeling discontent at one thing or another. And his realization was that a lot of that discontent is actually self-created. And there's actually a deeper meaning to dukkha, which is the word sukha, from which it's derived. The word sukha means literally good hole, and it referred to the hole in a wheel, the axle hole in a wheel. Because when we think about it, the wheel was, the great technology of the time. It changed everything with transport and everything. So a wheel needed to have a good hole in order to not run smoothly, there'd be no resistance. So dukkha means a wheel with a bad hole, which means it's not running smoothly, there's resistance. And that's what he saw, the resistance that's led to the clinging of really not accepting what is. There's a phrase, I think many of us heard these days is, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And what that refers to is, yes, we get pain, we're going to have pain, it's inevitable. The suffering is more the resistance to the pain, is not accepting the pain. And the way the Buddha illustrated this was, he was saying, we get stabbed by, I think he said an arrowhead or something. We stab ourselves with an arrowhead, that causes pain. And then we give ourselves a second stab, and that's the suffering. So it's like the suffering is added discontent over the pain that's there. And then his second noble truth was, what is the cause of this discontent that we all experience? And this is where clinging came in. The second noble truth is that we cling to ideas of, basically we cling to ideas of what we think will make us happy. And this is something we talked about in, I think, previous sessions. Basically, the fundamental motivation, the bottom line of everything we do is that we want to be happy. We want to be content. We want to be at peace. Whatever we do may be convoluted, but the back of it is we think in some way or another we'll feel better for this. And this feeling better is what I call the natural state of mind. Feeling good is our natural state of mind. And if everything is okay in the world, there's no problems, there's no threats, there's nothing we need to take care of, we feel good inside. When there's something that needs taking care of, then we naturally feel discontent. We want to do something about it. So the natural state of mind is one of contentment. And that's what we're looking for, in a way, to return to the natural state of mind in everything we do. We want to return to that state of ease, that state of contentment. And what we get caught in our society, and I think probably most societies, I just know our society, Western society, but I think probably all societies through history, we get caught in this idea that if we're not happy, we have to do something about it. We have to change something. We have to act. And that sort of runs through our culture. At times it's very important. There's things we do need to do in the world. But a lot of the time, that's just coming from some some imagined need. We start thinking about, what's going to happen tomorrow. Do I need to do this? We start creating discontent, and then we try to resolve that discontent by doing something. Or we're feeling low, so we go and whatever it is, go to the movies, have some more coffee, eat some more food. But that's the basic sort of belief system really that runs our culture, and that is what creates a lot of discontent. And the irony of all this is we're looking for happiness, we're looking to feel content, whatever word you want to give it. I sometimes just use the word okay. We're looking to feel okay. And so much of our thinking about how we are going to be okay, what's going to make us feel okay, stops us feeling okay. It creates discontent. In a strange way, the way we're looking to end suffering. We want to be happy. We're looking to end suffering, and we get caught in all these ways that actually create suffering. And I sort of think this is sort of almost a sad joke about human beings. We want to be at peace. We want to end suffering, and yet in our attempts to do that, we're just creating more and more suffering and tension. Then the third noble truth was the truth of the end of suffering. And the word there is interesting. It's, in his language, it's nirodha. This I find fascinating because this word is key to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras as well. And it's often translated as ceasing. And it's a sort of fairly good interpretation word, is ceasing. In the Yoga Sutras, and it's almost that this is so parallel to what Buddha's teaching, the Yoga Sutras start saying, yoga is the ceasing of the whirling of mind stuff. And I translate yoga not as getting unified with something, but the end of separation, the end of our separation, the internal separation of inside us, the division, the duality, the end of that duality, that is yoga, comes from the ceasing of the whirling of mind stuff. The whirling of mind stuff is our thoughts whirling around. What if, oh, that's good, that's exciting, I shouldn't have done that, whatever. That's the whirling of mind stuff. And the way that was traditionally interpreted, you've got to stop it. Ceasing means you have got to stop it. You've got to control it. And that's gradually giving away these days to a realization, no, it's about allowing it to cease. In fact, the word nirodha literally means not sprouting. It's to cease sprouting. And so that's why in my approach to meditation, which is similar to some others, it's about not trying to stop thoughts, not trying to stop the whirling of mind stuff. But when you realize you're caught in a thought, just not following it, not following that particular thought that comes up. So by not following it, we're basically returning, we're coming back, we're returning to ourselves, returning to being, or returning closer to that. And I think that is, in a way, the real renunciation is not renouncing things in the world. It's renouncing, it's more saying, I'm not going to follow that thought. When a thought comes up, it's choosing to say, I'm not going to follow that, because that's just going to lead to more discomfort, more discontent. I'm not going to follow that thought. And that I think is probably one of the most fundamental choices we have, is the choice not to follow a given thought, given idea. And that's what I call the ego mind. I call it the ego mind. I don't like to talk about ego, because that gives the idea there's something, there's some entity inside us, something called ego. But there's no thing there. There's just a mindset. There's a way of looking at the world that we get caught in. And so I think Buddha's realization was when we let go of the clinging, when we cease the clinging, when we cease to follow those thoughts we get stuck in, when we cease to follow those thoughts, then we're stepping out of the ego mind. We're coming back to whatever you want to call it, our authentic self, our being, our true essence. And what I like about seeing it this way is it makes liberation, which is really, the goal of all Buddha's teachings was liberation, freedom, but liberation. It's not some far off goal. And so often I hear this in teachings, you're like, if you do this, do that, do this, then basically at the end of all this, you'll get liberated. I see it not as some far off goal, but it's something we can touch into, we can taste. Any time really, we can have a taste of it. Anytime we just choose to let go of our thinking, come back, as we've been doing in the meditations, just coming back to that sense of, here I am. That's that liberation from being caught in the whirling of mind stuff. So that I think is what, that's what the Buddha was experiencing clearly, is that letting go of clinging, how that was. And then the fourth noble truth is what's often called the Eightfold Path, which again is traditionally interpreted as, these are the steps you have to take in order to get liberated. I found a quote here I found the other day, which I think is, where is it? So perfect. Yes, the Eightfold Path to Nirvana, in which an aspirant must become practiced in right views, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Do all that, and you will be liberated. That's the sort of background idea that's going on here. What I've been doing is exploring a very different interpretation of this. And it's not to say that all the classic interpretations of Buddhism are wrong. There's so much value in that. I don't want to in any way, be saying they're wrong, but it's just another view that I've been playing with, which I find useful in my own life. So the Eightfold Path, the word is marga, which means way, in a way, in the same sense as, the Tao Te Ching is the way. We talk about the way. And the classic interpretation is it's the way to liberation. But I've been looking at it more is it's the way of liberation. It's what happens what happens as you awaken. It's an unfolding of the awakening. It's a description of the awakening. And again, it's called the Noble Eightfold Path. This is noble. It's how the wise ones see it. And the first element is right view. And again, the conventional approach is that you have to, adopt the right perception. You have to see that, have to accepting that life is impermanent, that all life is sacred, and in some traditions, death is not the end, and you might have to set karma, there's consequence. It's a whole sort of set of view of the world. But to me, the view of the wise ones, the noble ones, the views of the wise ones, the liberated ones who've already stepped out of the ego mind, is they're spontaneously, automatically in the right view. The liberated person sees things as they are because their mind is no longer clouded by all the machinations of our egoic thinking. They've let go of that perspective, that sort of egoic perspective, what I've got to do, worry about this, worry about that. They've let go of that. So they're naturally seeing things as they are. They're naturally in right view. And so it's like, it's not that the right view leads to liberation, but the right view comes from liberation. This is what I've been exploring in all these bits of the Eightfold Path is, do we sometimes put the cart before the horse? The horse is the awakening and the cart is what it brings with it. But so often I think we see the cart, we see what the awakening is, and we think, I've got to do that, I've got to give up this. If awakened people aren't so attached to things, I've got to not be attached to things. I think in some ways we get it back to front. And this is the second path, second way is right thought, or sometimes said right intention. But again, I think this can follow. If someone's already awake, then their thinking is not clouded by the views of the ego mind. They're already free from that. I mean, in classic views, it says, part of the right thinking is, not to do any harm, the intent to do no harm. But if you turn it around the other way, it may not be so much there is intent to do no harm, so much as there is no intent to do harm. I mean, it's subtle, but to me, it's a very profound shift in thinking. And I just think, with, as I said before, with more and more was exploring non-dual teachings, I think this sort of this approach to it, I think, for me, is much more meaningful, much more realistic in my own life. I don't want to spend 20 years doing all these other things in the hope I might get liberated. It's more the practice is coming back to that, finding that in oneself day by day, tasting that. And the same as we go on through the others, right speech. Right speech is speech that causes no harm. And again, it's the ego mind that starts causing harm to others. It's the ego mind that judges other people. It's the ego mind that maybe wants to attack someone verbally or criticize them verbally, or the ego mind that wants to say, look at me, I know, I'm right. So again, I think if someone who's already ceased that clinging, the third step, I think is naturally going to be more attuned to just speaking without harm, speaking right. In fact, it was one of Buddha's definitions of right speech was, or one of the ways he put it was, if you can't say something without the other person feeling hurt, then it's better to retain noble silence. And then there's other things about right speech, which I'm sure a lot of us know, is that the question we can have when we're saying anything is, I think there's four ingredients or four criteria which people often comment on or say, which is one, is it true? Is it useful? Is it timely? And is it kind, as things to bear in mind? But then as we go on, I see the same thing with the other elements. I don't see them as steps or stages or practices. I see them as the elements of awakening. The next one is, right, what we say, wise action, the action of wise people. And the same, I think if we're free from that ego motivation to start with, then our actions are naturally going to be wiser, be more, if you like, be more right, be more correct. And with right, the fifth one is right livelihood, how we live our lives. I think the same sort of thing applies. And then the last three get particularly interesting for me. Right effort or wise effort. Remember, this is the view of the wise person. I keep coming back to this is how the wise person sees it. The wise person who's awoken. In fact, that's what the word Buddha means. Literally, it's just the one who has awoken. So the way the wise people see it is, it's not about putting a lot of effort, put a lot of trying to control things. In meditation, particularly, as you know, in my approach, I encourage no effort whatsoever. It's really allowing the mind to relax, and any effort we put into it is actually doing the opposite. It's creating more tension in the mind. But I think it's also about how we act in the world, how we flow in the world. Again, it's this, sukha is about flowing in the world without resistance. So I like to think of it more as right effort is relaxed intention. We have intention, but instead of going at it and forcibly trying to change things, we just more relaxed about it, allowing things to flow. And I always find in my life, the more I allow things to flow, the better it is. I mean, I had something earlier this week. I was thinking I should call somebody to sort something out and didn't quite know what to do about it. And this voice just said, leave it. And half an hour later, I got a message from somebody and everything had totally changed. The situation had totally changed. I didn't need to do anything. But it's that's what I mean. It's not about we got to keep doing and controlling the world, but it's about stepping back and taking a more relaxed approach to things. And then the seventh one is right meditation, right mindfulness. It's often translated as, which, as I mentioned before, for me is about not following the thoughts, catching the sprouting as it occurs, and coming back to being, coming back to that authentic self, returning, as I put it last week, 2 months ago now, returning to natural mind, returning to that natural great peace. But it's about removing the veils to it. We don't create peaceful states of mind. We remove the veils to the peaceful state of mind. I think that again is the shift. And the word sati, that's often translated as mindfulness, literally in Sanskrit and in Pali, means actually to remember. So I see mindfulness is remembering our true nature. It's not remembering as an idea who we are, as some understanding, some idea, but just coming back, reconnecting with our own essence, reconnecting with our own being. And the final one is literally right samadhi, which is translated as right concentration. But again, that gets so easily misinterpreted, I think, as you've got to concentrate the mind. You've got to, really control the mind, keep it focused. I mean, you can do that, but it's very, very hard. It's the way it's actually defined, samadhi. It's the mind that has come together, it's collected together, and it's defined as the still mind. It's the mind that's just resting in being. So it's not actually an instruction to concentrate the mind in that deliberate way. It's more, as I said, the mind or the attention becoming concentrated in being. It's like, I think of it as concentrated orange juice. It's like, it's the essence of it. Concentrated orange juice is the essence of orange juice. It's the concentrated mind is the mind that is just, it's become concentrated in its essence, concentrated in its true nature. And that is the mind that is, is settled, it's clear, it's what comes again from letting go of clinging. And some Buddhists describe it as the state of the great perfection. Perfection means nothing more can be added. It's not like there's no blemishes. It's like nothing more can be added. And that to me is why it's called nirvana. Nirvana literally means blowing out the flame of desire. In that state, there's nothing, I'm sure some of you have known this in meditation. When you're deep in meditation, deep in that quiet state, it's like, why would I want anything else? There's nothing to be added to this. And there's that sense of freedom. This is the liberation that Buddha was talking about, the inner liberation, the freedom. And every time we let go a little, we have a little taste of that freedom, whether it's just that sense of relief or greater ease or greater quietness, whatever it is. We are tasting that liberation he was talking about. We don't, every time we pause our thinking, we don't drop into complete enlightenment. No, but we are tasting that awakening. And the more we taste it, the more there's that motivation to continue that way. So I just give that as that's sort of the way I've been exploring and playing with it. I know it's very unconventional, and devout Buddhist teachers may say I'm totally wrong, I don't get it. And I know, if you look at Buddhist texts, it's clear, very, very clear, that part of what Buddha was teaching was about you need to, see things the right way, think the right way, you need to speak the right way, etc. That's clearly there. But there's the other view as well. And in fact, I know some Buddhist teachers who see it both ways. They see it both as this is what you need to do as the path to awakening, but also the other way around, that this is a description of how awakening unfolds. This is the way of awakening, the way it unfolds. And as I say, I just find it more pertinent for me, more relevant to my life. So I'm not dissing the traditional view. I'm just saying here's an interpretation which I really like and is valuable for me. And I think, I may have mentioned this before, I think what happens with not any awakening person, but most people when they, quote, wake up, is they find life is so much more delightful, enjoyable, they're at ease, that they want to share it with other people. And that's what the Buddha happened to the Buddha. He woke up and it's like, wow, hey, this is the way. And so he goes off excitedly to his friends. And he sort of tells them, hey, what we, of course we're all discontent, but what happens? It comes from clinging. We have to let go of clinging. And then what I've discovered is, this is when that happens, this is how you see things, etc., etc., etc. I think he was clearly, we accept he was a fully awakened person. And he talked about there is no self. He'd seen there is no self in the sense of no individual, separate, personal self. And so he'd have been talking from that perspective of seeing there is no self. And so I think he would have been expressing the view that I've been talking about here as well. That like, this is how it is. This is how it is when you wake up. But what happens with, I think, every spiritual teaching that comes up like this is the people who are listening are not awakened. So they're listening from the unawakened state, wanting to be awakened, but misinterpreting it or not misinterpreting, but interpreting it from the unawakened point of view. And like, this is what we've got to do, etc., etc., etc. And the awakened perspective, which is, just about coming back, touching into, reconnecting with our being, is what Rupert Spira calls the direct path, gets forgotten, gets ignored, because the existing culture doesn't have the sort of the way to see it that way. It wants to see things in a dualistic way. And so I think that interpretation of teachings gets lost, gets forgotten. And so that's really what I've been playing with myself, just how do we come back to that more non-dual approach.